Online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Mayor Pete, who was Secretary of Transportation, he's that mannequin from the men's department at the Macy's in Mishawaka who escaped, ran for president, and then was appointed Secretary of Transportation. He sat down with that yapping terrier, Chuck Todd, to talk about the wonders of the forthcoming $1 trillion under his spending discretion to a significant extent, saying this. There's a particular word he uses that really riles me. See if you can pick it out.
We are supporting short-term action, but you're right, this isn't a stimulus like we had in 2009. This is about making sure that America is competitive for the rest of this century. We are, funding repairs that could begin almost immediately, that mayors and states have been wanting to do for a long time, but we're building cathedrals here in terms of some of the bridge replacements or major projects of national significance.
Building cathedrals.
Cathedrals, that's exactly it.
Building, what does that mean?
Well, we're building these, wonderful, culturally, economically important roads and bridges and other infrastructure, which, by the way, as we know, is a small part of the overall $1.2 trillion in funding money spent. But regardless, it's just such a government-centric way to talk about the world, to refer to public works projects as cathedrals. I don't know. It's just to tell. Maybe I'm being too persnickety about it, but I don't think so. I'm going to give myself the benefit of the doubt on this one.
Okay, good job, Dan.
Thank you.
I'm glad you had that talk with yourself.
Yeah, I think I was fair to myself, even-handed. Also, we have Biden the Fabulist has made a reappearance. Biden the Fabulist, who lies about his academic record, who lies about who he plagiarized speeches from, who lies about
Corn Pop. Does Corn Pop really exist?
He has imaginary friends. He lies about even things like the tragic death of his first wife and daughter in that car accident, where he says the driver was drunk and the driver was not drunk. Why do you lie about these things? Well, he lied again, and he lied about infrastructure, or he lied, I guess, to advance infrastructure. He said that fire destroyed a significant portion of his home in New Hampshire. And, it was one of these, but for a bridge, it's a 10-mile detour to get to the other side. And I know, having had a house burned down with my wife in it, she got out safely, God willing, that having a significant portion of it burn, I can tell 10 minutes makes a hell of a difference.
Yeah, that's when he was on the bridge, saying that this bridge helped, save lives. Their house was struck by lightning in their kitchen.
Small fire contained to the kitchen, according to a 2004 report from the AP.
And Biden it was put out by 20 minutes, yeah.
Biden the Fabulous, Biden the pathological liar. He's probably so feeble intellectually. I mean, he was feeble intellectually at 30. But this is a different sort of intellectual feebleness he's dealing with now. But he probably thinks that those things are actually true because he's lied about them for so long, and he's gotten away with those lies for so long. But I just thought I'd point that out just to remind people what a despicable human being he is. He's not just a dope. He's a despicable person, because only despicable people tell this many lies for this long in furtherance of their political career, to sort of make them out to be somebody more important or more interesting than they actually are. He's just such a disreputable figure. He makes me sick. But anyway, I digress. For more on the economics of all of this and a few other topics, pleased to be joined by Christopher Whalen. He's an investment banker and chairman of Whalen Global Advisors. He's also the author of Ford Men, From Inspiration to Enterprise, and he's the editor of the Institutional Risk Analyst. Christopher, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Well, good morning, Dan. Good to see you're in such a happy mood.
Yeah, well, I
got
to get all the poison out, because so much of it needs to be delivered. Yeah.
I know. Start your morning with a good retch.
Yes, exactly. So, but what about that? The infrastructure, that shouldn't be a bad word. It can be a bipartisan thing. We heard that from some of the big government Republican senators and members of Congress who folded in with the administration on this one. Are they right about this? That this 1.2 trillion is going to produce a returnable, a discernible ROI for the country?
No, infrastructure projects are notoriously difficult to measure when you think about equity returns and just, is it good for society? Is it good for the economy? They tend to have very low returns, but on the other hand, bridges and functioning infrastructure are clearly useful. They clearly do help the economy. But it's not the same kind of bump you get from private sector investment, let's put it that way. It's much lower. So it's necessary, it's a commodity, and it's needed. You know, we've been arguing about building tunnels across the Hudson River to replace the Civil War era structures we have. And, you know, people just don't want to pay for this stuff generally until Uncle Sam shows up and sprinkles magic pixie dust and borrows a lot of money. And then, you know, the good times roll. So it's hard to separate the useful parts of this legislation. And there are some useful pieces, right? Like the guy said, there are governments out there that would like to do things, that have already planned them, have already, you know, got everything ready. They just don't have the money. But then you have the social engineering by the Democrats, which is a very different thing. They want us to look like France without good food. That's essentially what they want.
Well, then, but President Biden keeps saying, this is the solution to inflation. You know, inflation's going to go down. America's going to be better. Your life is going to be better starting now.
No. We're going to think of Joe Biden in the same breath as the, you know, rulers of Argentina, because, you know, the amount of money that the Fed has pumped into the system, first off, is already creating inflation. But if we get an uptick in the economy, if we get an uptick in what we call the velocity of money, you're going to see inflation gallop away. Now, the only thing that helps us, and we never talk about this, right, is that the rest of the world uses the dollar. And I don't just mean central bankers and the kind of stuff they talk about in classrooms. I'm talking about how we value real estate around the world. It's almost entirely dollars, other than authoritarian countries like Russia and China. You go all over Latin America, people get paid in dollars. They're indexed in dollars. So every time the consumer price index goes up in Chicago, everybody down in Uruguay and Brazil and Argentina gets a pay increase if their pay is set in dollars. So there's this vast demand around the world for these pieces of paper with dead presidents. But on the other hand, we're doing our best to try and undermine this system by spending money we don't have. And the Democrats, you can't even have a conversation with them about this anymore because they are so crazed and so focused on trying to draw attention to themselves that they will say and do anything.
Well,
you know, Elizabeth Warren, a great example of this.
Yeah.
She knows better. She's a smart lady, but she will say and do ridiculous things just to get the TV cameras to point at her for a couple of minutes.
Well, right. I mean, they say things that run afoul of like basic Econ 101 principles. So obviously some of them have to know that they're lying. But
well, let's go attack the banks so we can have higher economic growth, right?
Right.
We've already neutered the big banks, but Elizabeth's not done. She wants to cut a couple arms and legs off. Well, you know, seriously, because you wonder why there's no growth. It's because we're making it up with small, new, nimble, non-bank companies, which are great, but they don't have any money. All the money's in the bank, like, you know, Clarence Darrow said, right? So.
But so here's the question, though. They're in a bit of a trick bag, their lies notwithstanding. They can't lie their way out of economic reality completely. And so the trick bag is, well, inflation will subside once the Fed tapering ends the end of next year. But there may be an indication from the Biden administration they don't want the Fed tapering to end. That's why Jerome Powell is going to be out and perhaps somebody like Brainerd in. And so if they continue quantitative easing to prop up the market, then you're going to continue to see inflation pushed out for a longer period of time at the levels that we're at now or worse. So they have to pick a poison, don't they?
That's right. And they're faced with a lot of bad choices. So, for example, if we see $1.5 trillion get through the Senate, and eventually they agree on the spending package, right? Treasury's got to go raise that money. We've had a couple of pretty bad auctions already this year where investors were not happy with what they were offered by the Treasury. And if we get a combination of higher inflation and lower growth, which is possible, you can have both. And then you have a new Fed chairman, Lyle Brainerd, the great socialist from Maryland, who is not credible. You could see the dollar crater. You could see a lot of bad things happen that we have not seen in many, many years. We've been kind of on autopilot for decades, really. Because think about it, the Trump years is where the inflation started. Big budgets, cut taxes, huge deficits, ridiculous deficits. And nobody cared. Everybody thought it was great. So now we get a bunch of Democrats in office who are less credible with the markets, and, we could get to the point where we have a problem. And we haven't had a problem like this in 50 years, Dan.
Well,
so I think that, there's a lack of awareness in the markets and a lack of readiness, in a sense, to deal with these issues, because we haven't had to deal with this stuff since I was a kid.
Right, we're only going to deal with them when we have to.
Well, yeah, but, we assume we can always raise money whenever we want to. But that may not be the case. So we're pushing the envelope as hard as we can, and especially on the left. They have no idea, nor do they care. They don't care. Look at AOC. Do you think she cares about economics? No.
Or understands it? No.
So that's what we're living with now. You're asking good questions, but nobody in D.C. is thinking about the answer. That's the bottom line.
What's the indicator for you? I mean, is it watch the 10-year when that goes up? It's time to exit stage left if you're in the market?
The tug of war has been between the Fed and the markets. If the markets take over and start to push interest rates up, despite the fact that there's huge demand for that paper because they've been buying bonds, as you said before, then we got a problem. Because if the markets become aware that the Fed is not in control, you could see the stock market lose 10, 20% of its value, even though there's nowhere else to go. I mean, other than stocks and real estate, where do you hide? Crypto? You go play poker with the kids offshore? No. That's my description for crypto, by the way.
I got that.
That's good.
We're speculating on the value of poker chips, okay? Because most of my buddies who trade crypto, what were they? Foreign exchange traders and professional poker players. That's who these people are.
But by the way, I noted that the Publix grocery stores in Florida and the Southeast, they're rationing some staples for the holidays like Gatorade and bacon. Two
staples of American life. Yeah.
No, that's right. That's
and they go so well together too.
That's my breakfast, so I'm particularly sensitive to that. So what does that say about where we are with like potential for real sort of medium-term shortages, like we're talking about medium-term inflation and perhaps stagflation?
Well, we certainly do have a lot of shortages around the country, depending on where you are and how the distribution system is working or not. There are many, many shippers out there that are desperately looking for drivers. They can't get them. People aren't taking the jobs. They're not taking jobs in restaurants. They have pulled back. So I think you're going to see a lot of, if you will, bottlenecks in terms of supplies that consumers are used to just getting, especially around holiday time. And then the other thing is we could see lockdowns again. Look at Florida. Mr. DeSantis has dug himself quite a hole. And, instead of doing the right thing and trying to minimize the problem, they have made it worse.
In what way? Can you explain that, please?
Well, look, my attitude is, unless you have a medical reason not to get vaccinated, go get vaccinated. I mean, otherwise, we're basically saying that we're not going to take any measures. We're not going to have any state agencies involved. We're just going to let it go. And you're dealing with a population in Florida that's elderly, that's terrified. All my friends down there don't know what to do. They're all hiding in their homes. So, to me, if you see public health officials have to force people into lockdown again, this economy is going to take quite a hit.
Well, yeah,
New York City.
Yeah, but it's COVIDians in places like New York City that are talking about that, not in Florida, where, oh, by the way, they have the lowest...
we're not talking about that in Florida or Texas.
Well, you don't have to because there's not a need to do it.
They also have the lowest case
right.
Per capita rate in the country in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the lockdowns...
At the moment. That's right.
Well, at the moment, but I mean, the lockdowns don't work. Just because politicians might do them doesn't mean that we should sort of act it in furtherance of them doing them, sort of act accordingly. The hell with that. I'm not going to go along with some stupid public policy because it's seemingly the path of least resistance and then they turn around and then they change the measurement by which we regain our freedoms anyway. I mean, that makes no sense. We've been doing that for 2 years.
We've buried 1 million people because of this virus. So, at a certain stage, you have to recognize that there is a problem, but we still don't know how to deal with it. Honestly.
Well, I mean, before COVID hit, 8,000 people died a day in the United States of America from various diseases.
They still are.
Yeah, but are they dying from COVID or with COVID?
We don't know. We're not collecting any data.
Yeah, I mean, Well,
the data we've collected, it's ridiculous.
There's just no evidence that what we've done has produced a positive net impact on life saving or much less quality of life. That's the issue. I mean, in terms of it's the opportunity cost. It's not we're indifferent about people dying. It's a question of is what we're doing helping to save lives? And the answer, according to a number of studies, and Scott Atlas talked about this on Bart Roma yesterday, is no, we're not. So
and you see that in Europe too. I mean, there are certain countries that decided to essentially, reject lockdowns and everything else, and they initially had a very bad time, and then they ended up statistically looking like the rest of Scandinavia. We're talking about Sweden here,
right?
So the answer to me, just speaking as an analyst, is we don't know.
We don't know.
Have any data.
But
so that's great as we head into the next winter. But I am sitting in the suburbs now.
Well, and the answer to me as a political hack is whatever New York is doing, I want to do the opposite.
Darn right.
Christopher Whalen.
Yes.
Yeah, Christopher Whalen, investment banker, chairman of Whalen Global Advisors, author of Forward Men from Inspiration to Enterprise, and editor for the Institutional Risk Analyst. Christopher, always good to have you. Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper. Hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Famous conservative